This episode is brought to you by the future. Oatly had experts look into the future, which is totally possible, by the way, and then report back about what things will taste like when we get there. Learn about bold ideas, the dawn of decaf, and the rise of fiber in the Future of Taste report on Oatly.com. Welcome back to the coffee show, everyone. And my gosh, I'm spoiling you this year. 2026, everyone's just getting off to an absolute roar of a start. Well, here on the coffee show we are. You're in for another treat, ladies and gentlemen, because we have for you none other than world-leading coffee roasting expert, Scott Rao. Welcome to the coffee show.
Thanks, Kirk. Nice to be here.
It's so fantastic because I see you, with the exception of the COVID years, you're here once a year, pretty much every year. You love Australia.
I do.
It's and you're a big time surfer guy.
I'm not a very good surfer, but I love surfing.
Oh, yeah. You participate, you dabble. And what are you doing here this time around? Just chilling?
Mostly chilling.
Just on holiday?
Yeah, having a good time. Going to brew some coffee at Calera on Sunday, but otherwise kind of chilling, enjoying Australia.
You'll see me there on Sunday.
Awesome.
I don't know if anyone can sort of deduct from following you on Instagram, but you kind of, everything's on. You kind of live a nomadic lifestyle. You don't have like one place that you are all the time. You're
Yes.
always in a different part of the world.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
I'm running from the law.
You're running from the law?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So they got it out for you?
Yeah, that's it.
Ma Baker? I like it. But you are traveling quite frequently.
Yeah,
And
most of the time. Yeah.
do you ever get over that?
Once in a while, but overall it's pretty fun.
Okay.
Yeah, like anything, trade-offs. I mean, it's always new. It's always interesting. It's never boring. Sometimes it's a little tiring, but yeah.
And you also just had yourself a delightful little co-ferment latte down at my down at my shop, which I forced you to have. To be fair. He wouldn't voluntarily ask for it, but I forced him to have it.
I actually had 2 co-ferments today.
Okay, who was the first?
I went to Tone Coffee Roasters.
How was that?
It wasn't stated as a co-ferment, but it was a farm that I know always does co-ferments, and it was in milk. It was okay. As espresso, it was quite intense.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how's the apple, the declared co-ferment? How's the we call it the apple custard pie?
It was good. It's very, very fruity.
It's a bit more, very fruity, but more mild than some of them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about co-ferments later, but I think that there's a place for it. I would like to see co-ferments get toned down a bit, where they're adding a little dimension or something novel to the coffee, but not overwhelming the cup. I think that would make it a more sustainable, popular thing.
Well, one of the best ways to do it, I think, currently is to blend it, which is probably the better option, really, because co-fermented coffee is expensive. So if it's more intense and you can blend it, then it's more cost effective and you have a similar effect. But I mean, before we get into the coffee roasting stuff, I kind of feel like co-ferment has been one of the best things that's ever happened to specialty coffee in a way, because like I've previously, when I had Sub-Zero coffee and I've got a freezer full of like geishas or whatever, and you pay $20 for it, a customer does. And, we describe the farm and we describe the notes and stuff like that. And, very rarely do you capture a customer and make them a lifelong customer and just a fan of that, because it's just hard. Not everyone's into that. But you whack strawberry cheesecake or apple custard pie in a box and the people just get it. Like it's kind of like the TikTok effect. They only have to click once or twice and they've got the product in their hand. They know everything they need to know about it to enjoy it. And like, I feel like that's kind of something specialty coffee is needed. And, co-ferment gets them through the door to enjoy the other things. I really don't think it's the threat to the rest of it.
I think it's interesting that specialty coffee had that, and it has waxed and waned in the sense that when I got into coffee in the 90s, hazelnut and vanilla coffee was quite popular. And what roasters would do, like I worked for a roaster once where in their basement, they would have buckets of beans. They would pour some pre-weighed amount of flavored oil. They'd put the lid on the bucket, they'd shake it, the oils would get absorbed into the coffee, and then they would just grind it and brew it just like any other coffee. And that was a pretty staple offering, at least in the US. Like you would go in a shop and there'd be a batch brew Columbia and there'd be a batch brew hazelnut. And that was incredibly popular during the 90s. And that's quite similar to co-ferments in the sense that there's a very intense, easy to identify flavor that gets a lot of people interested in specialty coffee. And then maybe over time, those people pursue less intense flavors. Yeah.
No, I agree 100%. But let's get into the coffee roasting stuff now. And I think the goal of today's podcast is obviously to inform as many people as we can about, as much as we can about coffee roasting in the time that we're here. But But we want to cater to people that have like a beginner level, an intermediate level, and somewhat advanced level of roasting. So the way we're going to start this is that I want to, I guess, establish a little general glossary. So I've got like 10 words here that I'll ask. So one by one, we'll go through each word. And if you can give a concise kind of explanation and or definition, then I think that'll help everyone who's listening to understand throughout the whole podcast. So without further ado, when I say convection.
So I'm going to keep the definitions simple and how they apply to roasting. So convection is going to be heat transfer via the gaseous medium that is the hot air in the roaster.
So thinking of the hot air. Conduction.
So conduction is going to be heat transfer by direct contact. So where the bean touches the hot metal of the drum, conduction is happening.
Maillard reaction.
The Maillard reaction.
Maillard reaction.
Is a reaction between amino acids and reducing sugars. These reactions create compounds called melanoidins. This is more or less what gives coffee its brownness, or part of what gives coffee its brownness. It's a little bit like when you brown toast, that is caused primarily by Maillard reactions. The Maillard reactions require the moisture content to be below a certain threshold, which is why they don't really happen until about halfway through a roast. I'll stop there with Maillard.
Density.
Density is just how much something weighs versus how much volume it takes up. That's all there is to it. Yeah.
So I think pea berries versus, I don't know, margarita here.
Not necessarily, because the pea berry or the margarita might be the denser bean. So it depends on how much they weigh versus how big they are. So usually higher grown coffees are denser than lower grown coffees.
That Couture we had with we just made of yours back then. So
that was grown at 2,000 meters and quite a dense coffee.
Particularly small. First crack.
So about 3/4 of the way through the roasting process, during roasting, beans are heating up because of steam inside the beans. Pressure is building up inside the beans. The pressure is being held in to a degree by the cellulose structure of the beans. And what's happening is, as the beans cook, the cellulose structure is getting weaker and the pressure is getting higher. And eventually you reach a tipping point where the cell structure can't hold the pressure in anymore. And the beans literally fissure open and a little puff of moisture comes out of them. And we hear the crack sound when the beans fissure open. So a little bit like a volcano. Yeah, honestly. Yeah.
Very audible. You notice it. So first crack. Then let's go development time / percentage.
So traditionally, from the moment first crack begins until you end a roast, we call that the development phase. And the development time is just, how much time was there from the beginning of first crack to the end? Could be, 1 minute, 2 minutes. And then development time ratio is the percentage of the roast time that was during that phase. So it could be, 10, 15, 20, 25%.
Development.
So development's a bit of a hazy word. I would say development is the average amount that the coffee was roasted, and I would usually look at it through what is the color of the ground coffee. That would be the single best indicator of the average development through the coffee bean.
Rate of rise.
So that is, at any given moment in the roast, how fast is the bean temperature rising? So nothing more, nothing less.
Profile.
Another bit of a vague term. What most people mean by the profile is what is the shape of the bean curve, the bean temperature curve. So it might be, say, going faster in the beginning and slower at the end. And that particular curve is the profile for that coffee.
Airflow.
So just simply how much air per unit of time is moving through the roasting chamber.
Excellent. All right. So now let's get into the questions. And the first one so we can sort of cater to the beginners that are listening here as well. So if for whatever reason you had to learn to roast again, let's imagine this scenario, but you kind of or thinking now, if you had to learn to roast again, what would you do and where would you start?
Okay. So it depends on whether I want to learn everything I can about roasting or if I want to start putting out good quality coffee tomorrow, right? Because those are two different things. You could get a machine like you use the Link, right? Like the Link or the Roost sample roaster, or a machine like the P3000. They're so automated and they're so easy. You could easily be producing good coffee an hour after you start, right? Whereas if you buy a ProButter or Gießen or Diedrich, there's a lot more to learn to get good at the process. So if you wanted to learn everything you could about the dynamics of roasting, you might want to buy a drum roaster with everything, variable speed fan, variable speed drum, variable gas. But if you want to just put out good coffee easily, buy something somewhat automated like one of those machines.
And they're really effective too. Like, I mean, and to give a bit of context here, I had one of my staff members compete in the Australian Brewers Cup and we had 2 kilos of green coffee to work with. So I decided to roast it myself on a Nucleus Link. And what an amazing tool. Like, it's like really democratized being able to roast coffee across the world, really. For farmers, and if you want to do cuppings, roasting for filter, I'd probably say it's better for filter and sample roasting than it is for espresso and milk. That's just my opinion. But really effective tool for what it is. It gives a lot of value.
Quite easy to use, really.
Yeah, very, very easy. And so what are the differences between drum and air roasting?
So typically drum roasters have a heating source, could be a flame, could be electric, could be infrared, outside the drum. And the heat source is heating both the drum and the air that's getting pulled into the roasting chamber. So in those machines, you have a mix of convection and conduction. Convection from the hot air, conduction from the hot surface. So in an air roaster, typically, if it's designed well, you just have convection. You just have hot air. Yes, the walls of the roasting chamber they're hot, they're not cold, but they're not hot enough to further the roasting process or to cause flavor damage. So that's the main difference. Now, if you have conduction, you're going to have 2 things happen. You're probably going to get a bit more body from the coffee, but anytime you get more body through roasting, through brewing, whatever, you will lose a little flavor clarity along the way. So you mentioned just now, you might not think the Link is optimal for, say, espresso and milk, but it's great for filter coffee. It's an air roaster. So if you want the espresso to really come through strongly through a latte, you might want to use a conduction machine that gives you a little bit more body, and you might sacrifice a little flavor clarity because, let's face it, there's going to be 200 mils of milk in there anyway. You're not going to taste much nuance, right? So somebody could conceivably say air roasting is maybe better for nuance and light roasts, and maybe drum roasting is a little better for dark roasts or heaviness or espresso and milk.
I've been really interested in some of the air roasters lately, like the Typhoon, for example. It looks like a really interesting machine. Like it's such a big machine, but like so little of it is like a roasting chamber. But it's like, I don't know, it's the size of a car, but like 1/5 of it is actually for the roaster. And so I imagine there's some probably like intense mechanics in there that have to create all that heat. Is that?
I mean, it's air roasting generally happens at quite high temperatures. And like the Typhoon, there's really 2 Typhoon designs. There's the smaller one that I think goes 2.5 kilo and 5 kilo. It's kind of a small box, about maybe the size, a little bit bigger than your laptop. And the hot air is coming up from the bottom, pushing the beans up. So the beans are kind of jumping up and down. And then there's the larger machines, the 10 kilo up, where there's a larger round tray. There's a stirring arm to push the beans around a little bit, but still the air is coming up from the bottom and lofting the beans. Yeah,
the only I know of 2 people using it. So Ben Morrow, he's got a new roastery now, the Legendary Everyday. I'm not sure if he's using the Typhoon for that, but he was using it at Manhattan. And then Mason Salisbury from Luminous Coffee in the US. I think he roasts exclusively on them now as well. So interesting machines. I really like them, and I like the coffee that comes off them as well. Do you think, to that end, that the world should be like the coffee industry should be transitioning to exclusively air roasting one day? Like, I mean, global warming and climate change being what it is, like, and, gas resources being finite, although we probably won't run out anytime soon. But like, do you think there'll be a movement eventually to push everyone towards electric roasting?
Okay. So no. This is a nuanced answer. The internet doesn't like nuance, so let me break this down. So a few things matter here. Number one is that if you are going to buy a machine of, let's say, 15 kilos or smaller, it's pretty easy to buy an electric machine. It's pretty easy to have the electrical power necessary for that. If you were, say, let's face it, the vast majority of the world's coffee gets roasted in machines much larger than what you and I use. And let's say a machine is going to be 240 kilos or 500 kilos. That's a lot of electricity. And almost no facility is going to have that much electricity, and you're going to spend so much money to upgrade your electrical, if it's even available, that can be a make or break type decision right there, just because of that. Now, what is the source of your electricity? Now, people online will will argue about this, and I'm not making a firm statement here, but I'll just give you an example. Let's say your electricity comes from a coal-fired power plant. Not definitely, but probably it's better to use natural gas than a coal-sourced electricity, right? But let's say your electricity comes from solar or hydro or something. Maybe it's cleaner and better to be using electric. So I don't think it's a one size fits all. And certainly there aren't many electric machines that are larger than 15 kilos because of this problem of the amount of amps that, you'll need 380 volts. You'll need hundreds of amps just for one machine. It becomes a little bit of a practical issue.
Thinking of your answer here, I was speaking to someone about a big roaster here in Australia whose quality I feel like has declined.
Okay.
They explained to me that they're using like one of those like house-sized electrical roasters from I think it's Brembati.
Okay.
But they're able to recycle the air within the roaster, and that is there any truth to that?
You sure Brembati makes a large electric machine? I've never seen it, but it could
like
be
120 kilos, which to me is like a lot.
So there are a lot of machines that recycle hot air. So Loring, IMF. There are others that basically what happens is instead of having a burner for the roaster and an afterburner to clean the air, there's one burner that's effectively like an afterburner. It's running usually at about 600 degrees Celsius. And that is both generating the heat for the roasting process and also cleaning the air in the exhaust of the roasting. And then it'll recirculate a lot of the heat back into the roasting chamber. It's probably about 1/3 more efficient than having a burner plus an afterburner because of this recirculating of heat. I've never seen, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I've never seen a roaster that large that's electric. I can't imagine how many amps that requires.
Yeah, and by the way, that's not me saying that if you roast on a Brembati, your coffee's bad. It's just like how you use a roaster matters for the coffee quality.
No, Brembati can make great coffee.
Machines. Yeah. They're truly, truly excellent.
Yep.
So I want to start with, what do you think are some of the, we'll start with a negative and finish on a positive for this particular question. So what do you think are like the least important aspects for roasting coffee as pertaining to getting flavor out of the coffee?
The least important?
Yeah, what are the least important aspects of coffee roasting?
Okay, so the answer might depend a little bit on what type of machine you're using. But one thing that might surprise people is that in air roasting in particular, time is not very important. So I would posit that I could roast on my IMF, which is an air roaster. I could roast you a batch that's 6 minutes, another batch that's 12 minutes, same coffee, end result, same color. We could cup them blindly and neither one of us would be confident which cup was which.
Why?
Because short answer is that when you roast faster, you're having almost identical chemical reactions. They're just happening faster.
Okay.
Right. And really what matters is, did you get to your color? Right. So if you roast extremely fast, that can make inner bean development a little tricky. If you roast extremely slow, let's say like 16 to 18 minutes, inner development is slightly easier. But in the time range that most of us live in, the difference is immaterial.
So time, as it relates to air roasting, is probably not as important as people really think it is. Okay.
Now, the reason people feel time is important is that most people use drum roasters. And in drum roasting, time does matter. Now, time does not, contrary to what the internet thinks, time does not matter because of roasting chemistry. Time matters because fast roasts in drum roasters have hotter drum surfaces. If you roast twice as fast, you're making the drum hotter. That hotter drum contributes more conduction to the process. So in an air roaster, the beans don't care about the time because the same reactions are happening just faster. In a drum roaster, your conduction contribution is higher relative to convection compared to a slow roast.
So if I'm to simplify that, like if you're going faster, making it hotter, you're making the drum faster, which in turn would, if the drum's hotter and you're getting that conduction, you're getting probably burnt around the edges of the coffee sort of thing?
So at the extreme, we've probably all tasted fast drum roasts that were like a little burnt and a little underdeveloped simultaneously.
Yep.
Now, neither one of those things has to happen, but in a fast roast, generally you're at higher risk of each. So I would say you're at a great risk of slightly roasty flavors, even at light roasts. And depending on how you do it, you're at a slight risk that you will not develop the inside of the bean well enough.
Is there anything else that you think people put a lot of effort into that probably if they allocated their time elsewhere for roasting, they'd get better results?
Not quite. I mean, almost everything matters somewhat. Some things like airflow, depending on the machine, there can be quite a range of choices that can succeed. And I will say this, that I don't want anyone to misunderstand anything we're going to talk about today. There are many ways to succeed in roasting. Most of what I tried to promote and try to tell people to do is based on the idea that these ideas should give you the highest chance of success. That's not to say you couldn't succeed another way, right? I'm just saying, hey, if you shoot your free throws with this form and you master that, your odds of getting them in 90% of the time go up a lot. That's not to say you can't succeed with some other form. It's just that this is kind of the proven, way to do it that gives you the highest chance of success.
Yeah, extra points there on that answer for the free throw reference. I love basketball calls as it relates to coffee. Love it. Yeah. So what do you think are the most important aspects of coffee roasting to get flavor?
So the two most important aspects to me, and the two things that I think are almost all that matter, is hit your roast color, whatever that might be, and avoid excessive conduction. So if you have a light filter roast and you get a bit of conduction from getting the drum too hot, you will taste that. If you don't have much or any noticeable conduction, it's almost impossible to tell how fast was the roast, what kind of machine roasted it, whatever. As long as you've hit your color and you develop the inside pretty well, you're good.
So for our beginner roasters here, how's color measured?
So most color meters, there's a few different technologies, but they all look about the same. There's a lens or multiple lenses in this little, dark chamber. You take a small round tray. The tray might be the size of a coin. It might be maybe 10, 12 centimeters diameter up to there. And you put ground coffee in it. You smooth the surface. You put the color meter on top of it. You push a button and it says a color like 90 or something like this. And there's a spectrum called the Agtron. I don't know what to call it. Like the Agtron color range, higher numbers are actually lighter, which is backwards for everybody, right?
Kind of like pH.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little confusing. And what number you get is very dependent on your grind setting. So it's very difficult to talk about ground color numbers, because if you're using an EK and you're on number 4, and I'm using a Ditting and I'm on number 6, your number is going to be higher than mine. And we might have the same color, but we might have a 10-point or 15-point different reading. So that can be a little bit tricky. But like many things in coffee, just like the ending temperature in your roasting and other things, what really matters is internal consistency and knowing internally, how your number relates to yesterday's number and that kind of thing.
This is my approach to how I roasted Alex coffee, and without any knowledge of coffee at all. And, I lent someone my copy of the Coffee Roasters Companion. So damn it, didn't have that to help me, which is one of Scott's books.
It wouldn't have helped you very much with the link, but that's okay.
But anyway, so what I was doing was roasting and then brewing to how I usually would, and checking the solubility by measuring with the refractometer. And so obviously if it was too low, I knew, this is probably a little bit underdeveloped. I need to, I didn't really realize I could play with airflow on that roaster, and then worked out how to do it. And once I did, improved everything.
So a couple things here. The only variable that matters on that machine really is airflow.
Yeah.
Because the airflow is what makes the beans spin around. And if your airflow is too low at some parts of the roast, the beans will move slowly, and you might get some conduction if the metal's quite hot and the beans are moving too slowly. So one of the tricks in those machines is how much airflow? More, as long as it's not causing the beans to fly out of the roasting chamber, because that'll protect you from conduction to a degree.
Yeah.
The other thing is that if you're going to QC roasts, I strongly recommend cupping, not brewing. If you want to brew later, cool, right? Cupping is critical because it takes away the variability that exists in pour overs or espresso. And this is important because, for example, you could easily do a pour over and get some astringency due to channeling. And that astringency is going to potentially make the flavor seem less desirable. It might change your perception of mouthfeel, and it might just overall make you not like the coffee as much. And if you cup, you just don't have this variable. You just don't worry about channels. You don't worry about, if there's astringency in cupping, it's coming from Quakers. It's not coming from brewing. So it's simpler, it's easier to repeat. It's actually a lot easier to do a lot of bowls at one time, so it's convenient and efficient. So when it comes to solubility and roasting, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding there. You won't see much change in solubility unless you are genuinely underdeveloping a coffee. Then the TDS will go down a bit in brewing. Assuming you're in a range of light medium up to say like medium, let's say the solubility is going to be about the same. And actually, dark roasts aren't necessarily more soluble, despite the kind of rumor that they are. And what's happening with dark roast is, let's say you make an espresso shot out of a dark roast. You might get a little bit more extraction, but that's mostly because the cells are more porous. It's a little bit easier for stuff to get in and out. So it's a little easier for things to happen quickly. But in a cupping or in a V60, you won't necessarily see a higher TDS in a dark roast. And actually, if you go too dark, your solubility, so to speak, goes down because you're actually burning off some of the soluble material. So the percentage of that 20-gram dose that's in your V60 actually has a higher percentage of cellulose relative. Cellulose is not really soluble in water under normal circumstances. You have a higher percentage of cellulose and a lower percentage of soluble material that you could get out of the grounds. So solubility is pretty tricky to use to evaluate roasts unless you're at the extremes.
Gosh, we're 25 minutes in and I'm learning so much here that I can carry on to next year. So if you have a friend that's learning how to roast and you don't tell them about this podcast, you're a bad friend. So how do you go about, I guess, approaching roasts for different processes and different varietals of coffee and those sorts of things?
So there's three things that matter a lot when it comes to how you approach how to roast it. And there's something that everyone thinks matters that doesn't matter. Okay. So the size of the beans matters a lot. Larger beans require more energy to roast than smaller beans do. The simplest way to think of this is put a large loaf of bread and a small dinner roll in the oven at the same time. The roll is going to cook really quickly relative to that loaf of bread. There's a greater distance from the outside to the inside. So it's going to take longer to penetrate.
So we're talking like mocha versus Maracaipe or something? Or
yeah. So like a mocha could fly through a roast in 5 minutes, whereas a Maracaipe with all the same settings could take 8 minutes. I don't know, some very different amount of time, right?
So, but if a mocha is more dense,
is it?
Is it?
I think you're assuming that small beans are denser. Now, like the Caturra we had earlier was grown at 2,000 meters. That same Caturra grown at 1,200 meters probably would have a slightly larger bean and slightly less dense bean, but mochas are not necessarily denser than Maracaipe.
Okay.
Yeah. If that mocha was grown at 300 meters altitude and the Maracaipe was grown at 2,000 meters altitude, the Maracaipe would probably be more dense.
Yeah, because I had a moquita, so like it's some
hybrid.
It's pretty much just mocha, I guess you'd say, from Panama. And my approach to that was to increase the temperature because when I measured the density, it was more dense.
So density is going to be that thing that I mentioned. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
So we'll get there.
Here we go.
So the three things that matter, and before people freak out or say I'm an idiot online, let me explain the whole thing. Okay. Bean size matters because greater distance from the outside to inside means you need slightly more energy. Okay. Easy peasy. Moisture content matters a lot. Higher moisture coffees need more energy to roast than lower moisture coffees. The reason for this is that all but about 2 percentage points of the moisture are going to come out of the coffee. Also, some moisture gets developed during roasting and that comes out too. And the moisture that comes out is a little cooler than the bean surfaces. And that vapor that comes out, the energy that's approaching the beans, some of that gets used up burning off that water vapor to get to the bean surface. So there's a little force field of cooler moisture during most of the roasting process that's coming out that buffers against the heat getting in. Okay. So just as a side note to go really wonky on you for a moment, Christopher Ferran, if you don't follow him, he's an expert in processing and fermentation and whatnot. He knows a lot about green coffee, worth following. He has this thing he calls the green rehydration protocol. The idea is that if you have older green that's starting to taste baggy, you can add some water to the green and then roast it, and it actually tastes a little fresher, which is really interesting. So I've done this maybe 30, 40 times where I took 95 grams of green coffee, older green, put 5 grams of water in it, put it in a little Tupperware container, covered it, shook it up, came back and roasted it about 14 to 18 hours later. Now, the amount of energy I needed to apply to get to my usual ending color was, during the first third of the roast, it was like 70% more energy. And then the middle third of the roast, it was like 30% more. And then the last third of the roast, it was like the normal amount of energy because all that extra free moisture has left now. So I needed a tremendous amount more energy to roast this coffee than normal to get to the normal color. Okay. So that's number 2, moisture. And then number 3 is processing. So as you've probably seen, washed coffees tend to require a bit more energy to roast than, let's say, naturals. And this has to do with the strength of the cell structure, and it takes a little more energy to crack open that cell structure of the washed coffees. Now, there's 1,000 different processes now, so I don't know what's going on with it. I can't. If you say I have this thermoshock wash, blah blah, I have no idea. You know, like it's too much. I'm too old. It's like learning a new language. I'm like, nah, I don't know. Just figure it out. You know. So the reason why density doesn't matter that much, it's not that density doesn't matter. It's that density doesn't vary that much amongst high-grown specialty coffees. So what I mean by this is that your Magugipe might be easily 500% larger than your mocha bean, might be 300% larger than your average Ethiopian bean, your heirloom Ethiopian, right? That's a very big range. Increasing something by 300%, big range. All right. If I took all the coffees I have right now at Prodigal, their density probably varies by 20%. So it's not that density doesn't matter. It's that it doesn't vary that much.
Yeah.
Right? Your moisture content might go from 8 to 12. So that's an increase of 50%. So that's pretty significant. And the moisture is apples to apples, like a little bit more important than density anyway, as far as how much energy you need. So the density just isn't much of a player mathematically here.
Okay. Yeah. So would there be like a difference in approach? Say, for example, if you've got a natural, a washed, and a honey, it's all the same variety. Do they need different roast plans?
Depends on what kind of machine you're using.
Okay.
So in an air roaster, I'm not saying nothing matters. I'm saying almost nothing matters. Okay. So in an air roaster, you can get away with a lot because really all you have to do is get to your color. You could get there in 6 minutes or 12 minutes. You could get there with kind of a weird looking curve. I would advise against very, very large flicks or increases in the ROR at the end, because sometimes when you do that, you're getting like acceleration of cooking in the outside of the bean that doesn't necessarily transfer to the inside. But other than that, like you have a lot of flexibility with air roasting. Okay. In drum roasters, you have this problem where because you potentially have conduction with naturals and certain other processes, the beans are more delicate. Anybody who's roasted a natural knows that it is more likely to tip or scorch than a washed coffee. And part of that is the bean's a bit softer and a little more delicate. So that doesn't mean you have to approach it differently than your washed coffees, but it does mean that if you use one standard approach, that it has to be a slow enough roast with a cool enough drum that it's not going to damage the naturals.
The interesting part of that is that naturals often come out looking lighter visually than washed beans do.
So yes, and a lot of that is probably due to Quakers. So Quakers are basically immature seeds. So, or I could say seeds from immature fruit. So when you pick coffee cherries, if you pick underripe cherry, they will generally have beans inside that are what we call Quakers. These seeds and the cherry didn't get as much nutrition while they were on the tree as the riper ones did. And because of this, they won't be as fruity. They'll often be very nutty and possibly astringent. And at the extreme, they can be very acrid or vegetal. So naturals tend to have a lot more Quakers than washed coffees, in part because naturals don't usually have this flotation step where they float the cherry in water and then scoop out the floaters, which are almost certainly have Quakers inside them. Mm-hmm. And so the naturals, if you consider Quakers not just the yellow ones, but the brown ones that are just not, that they're nutty, they're not fruity.
Sorry, go on.
That's okay. So the average natural has 50%-ish Quakers of some kind, somewhere on the Quaker spectrum. Okay. And the average washed coffee, let's just say on a similar basis, has, maybe 15, 20%. So the Quakers just won't have as much pigment as the mature seeds do. So the naturals have a lot of Quakers. So they tend to look a little lighter to our eye because we're seeing a lot of Quakers inside the mix.
One of the reasons for the prevalence of Quakers in coffee that you buy, for example, be like, the farmer doesn't want to reduce their yield, so they're, putting, or is it like?
No, I mean, nobody wants Quakers.
Yeah.
They're very difficult to avoid. Some of them are inevitable. Just like if you have a blueberry tree in your backyard, the blueberries are not going to all ripen at the same rate at the same time, right? And when you go to pick the blueberries, you may not pick only the perfect ripe ones, right? Human error, it's difficult. It's really difficult sometimes. And each variety of coffee has a slightly different color of red or orange or pink that is the ripest one. So when you go to pick cherries, like you might paint your hand or you paint your nail or wear a bracelet or something, and you're constantly looking at, what does the pink bourbon, what is this supposed to look like? And then you're using judgment, which is difficult. But if there's, let's say, not enough rainfall, if there's not enough rainfall, you can't fertilize as much. If you don't fertilize as much, you may not be putting enough nutrients back in the soil. Seeds aren't going to get as much nutrition. You'll have more Quakers. Likewise, if it rains too much, that might actually dilute and wash away some of the fertilizer that you put in there. You get more Quakers. So, and there's other factors as well. So basically, they're impossible to avoid. They are possible to minimize. And then there's a lot of steps that you may or may not do, like floating beans and using density tables to remove the Quakers. Now, of course, also remember that removing Quakers costs money. You're losing product, right? Like at Prodigal, we use an optical sorter to take Quakers out. We probably take an average of 20-something% of our material out as Quakers, even though we're buying very, very expensive coffee, because we're trying to get rid of all of them so that we have like better aftertaste, like less astringency, less nuttiness, all the stuff. But the trade-off is that's really expensive, right? So whether you're at the farm level, whether you're an exporter, whether you're a roaster, it's like removing Quakers costs money. So there's always a trade-off. And then you have to decide, is this trade-off worth it? Is it worth that money to do this? Am I going to get more money for my coffee by removing the Quakers? Is that going to make up for the loss of money? And like the answer varies.
I was reading one of your blogs last night about the optical sorter. So could you tell us what the optical sorter is and how it works and what it does?
Yeah, so it's a machine that you load the beans in the top. The beans fall like a curtain or like a wall past a front and back camera. You tell the machine short version is you tell the machine what colors are acceptable, right? And you also tell it what percentage of the bean's surface can pass and fail in order to, whether to reject the beans or not. And so somehow, while the beans are falling rapidly in front of these sensors, the machine decides this bean has 75% of its surface outside of the target color range, and it spits a little puff of air, compressed air, and it knocks that bean out of the curtain into a reject bucket. And it does this rapidly. It's really fast. It's like a video game watching this thing where like you're trying to shoot the bad guys as they run by the screen. And so we'll run the coffee through it usually 2 or 3 times because the optical sorter, let's just say, ends up being between say 80 and 90% accurate in hitting its target. And so we'll run maybe the rejects through again. Maybe we'll run the non-rejects, but we'll try to clean it up so that it's getting well into the 90s in terms of accuracy.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating piece of technology. And I think the other interesting angle as well is you kind of had to program it for different coffees as well.
Can be difficult to program. Some of them are easier to program than others. It's tricky, but you just have to spend a few weeks or months getting used to your machine and mastering it, and then usually you'll end up having a few programs that work for all your coffees. But the beginning is hard. The beginning is very hard.
It's interesting you bring this up because I think like one of the missions of this podcast and missions of my life is to explain to the common person, I guess the coffee muggle, if you will, like the effort we go to make good coffee. Like I think everyone in the supply chain, whether or not they're amazing at their job or not, but pretty much everyone puts in effort. Like most people, generally speaking, and like this is some of the effort that some of the upper echelons of roasters go to just to give tasty coffee because the roasting. The coffee supply chain is so complex compared to, if let's compare it to wine. It's processed at the vineyard, bottled there, and the transport, freight, preservation, and serving of it is so much easier than coffee. Where it once it's picked, processed and then shipped, roasted. Everyone roasts differently, so there's myriad nuance and complexity there. Then same thing for brewing. And it's just so hard to get good quality coffee. So,
Absolutely. I mean, once the coffee's been processed, and let's say shortly after processing it's at its peak potential, there's so many ways to ruin it between then and the consumer's cup. Could get ruined in transport, which often happens. Could get ruined in roasting. Could get ruined in brewing. Could just storage, right? And it's like a minefield where to get an awesome cup of coffee, that coffee had to make its way through a minefield of possibilities, and it's kind of amazing that it ever works.
While we're on this topic, I may as well ask you now, what is kind of the optimal way of storing coffee, say for example, from farm to roastery, and then if you wanted to preserve it for a long time? Because I hear a bit of conjecture in the roasting community about this actually, because some farmers will vacuum seal bricks of green, and some people say that's not good over extended periods of time. So what's your take?
So the two things that matter are, well, there's a few things that matter. Effectively, temperature is number one. So in any step, whether it's green or roasted, the colder you hold it, the slower it ages. So in the green state, every 10 degrees Celsius, if you increase the temperature 10 degrees Celsius, it's going to age twice as fast. Okay, so if you decrease it 10 degrees, you're going to age half as fast, right? So, and if you freeze it, it's going to be aging very, very slowly. Like it almost doesn't seem like it's aging, because you could take green coffee out 5-10 years later and it still tastes great. In the roasted state, same thing. Cooler makes it age a little slower, and freezing can hold coffee almost indefinitely, like many, many years. Vacuum sealing definitely helps. So I'm not really sure.
Well, I think the reference is vacuum sealing, but not in a freezer or fridge. So it can like get sweaty up in there.
So I would say that in my experience, if let's say you're holding, for argument's sake, everyone held their coffee at 20 degrees Celsius, 68 Fahrenheit for the Americans, right? So vacuum sealed will age slower than held in a Grain Pro bag. That's just a hermetically sealed bag, but not vacuum sealed, which will tend to age slower than coffee exposed to air. The air doesn't have to be damaging to the coffee, but if there's fluctuations in moisture content and things like that, it can age the coffee a little faster.
So is there value, say for example, we established the value of using the optical sorter and what that does and how much that improves your product. Would you say there's, similar levels of value of, say for example, of keeping your green in a 20 degree environment, and if you're in a hot country, maybe investing in climate controlled storage?
Yep. So the calculus is going to be a little different for everyone. Obviously, let's say you bought a, $50 a kilo geisha, right? The value of slowing the aging of that coffee is much greater than the value if you buy a $6 a kilo green, right? You insure your diamond ring. You don't insure your t-shirt, right? Like, okay. So, it's not that expensive to keep the green cooler. Like for instance, we built a room about the size of the room we're in. It holds about 6 pallets. So think of it as like a 3-car garage or something like that. And we hold it at 7 degrees with a kind of a nice air conditioning unit, and it's got insulated walls, insulated ceiling. We built it for $5,000. We can easily keep 8,000 pounds, 4,000 kilos of green in that room. And it ages less than half as fast as it would at 20. So that helps, right? We have some freezers, et cetera. But everyone's going to have a different experience. If you're, depends on where you are as well. Like I once worked with someone in Queensland, and they had a really nice coffee. I got there, I tasted it. It was delicious. I happened to be passing by their place a month later, and I stopped in for coffee. They brewed that same coffee, and it tasted like it had aged a year. And the thing was, it was being stored high up on a rack where it was 35 degrees 24/7. It was just hot. Yeah. And that coffee just died in that 1 month. So
that's very interesting observation, because it does get quite hot in Australia, especially in the north where Queensland is, one of the great states of Australia. And it's interesting to mention about Christopher Runn's rehydration strategy. We had a guy who competed in the Brewers Cup not too long ago. His name's David Flood, and he used a Ugandan coffee that he'd had a lot of success with in the regionals, but then he actually rehydrated it, and it was a very interesting strategy. And just on Christopher Horan, one of the treasures we have in the coffee industry, that guy is, and I read his blogs on occasion, and such a brilliant mind, which makes me think I got to get him on the podcast. Like Chris, if you're listening, I need you.
I'm sure he'd be happy to do it.
Let's link up.
He's a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, just an exceptional writer. And I like his concept of roasting where I think he releases one coffee per month. So just nails the roasting for that and the sourcing. And, I really appreciate that. So let's get back to, the inner mechanics of roasting, if you will. So how does one optimize airflow for a drum roaster?
Okay, so this is something that I think is, I would say, fewer than 1% of professional roasters understand this concept. So I'm going to start by saying this. You know how the UG Probots, the older ones, have a little bit of a mythical status, like, oh, I love the coffee from those machines, right? The modern Probots, no one has that same feeling about it that they had, like the UG. And maybe it's just that they're cool looking machines and all this stuff. But here's what's interesting. The newer P-Series machines, the lowest allowable airflow level in those machines is higher than the standard non-adjustable airflow level of the old UG machines from, let's say, the 1950s.
So the lowest.
Today's lowest setting is still higher than the only setting on the 1950s UG.
Okay, that seems problematic.
Yes. So here's what's going on. The drum is the same. They have not changed the drum. The burners have changed, but it's still just heat a certain distance from the drum, and it's not an issue, really. Okay, power is about the same, right? All that's really changed is the airflow. And what happens is they set the airflow too high. Now, there's a bias in coffee. There's a bias in life, right? If you can witness something with your own eyes, it seems more important than if it's invisible, right? So if your airflow is too low, it's obvious because you see smoke and or chaff. When you open the door, it's like smoke everywhere, chaff everywhere. You're like, oh, my airflow is too low. Easy. Increase my airflow. When the airflow is too high, you don't know it. There's no obvious indicator. So we're biased. We tend to avoid airflow that's too low, but we tend to not know when it's too high. There's an asymmetry there. So what's going on with this is that when your airflow is too high, you are pulling heat out of the drum faster. Now, I need to establish that higher airflow in a Probot type machine does not increase convection. The reason it does not increase convection is that the burner works at a certain rate. Let's say you have your gas at 80% of maximum, all right? And let's say that at a certain airflow that produces air that's 500 degrees Celsius, just making that up, right? Now you increase your airflow by quite a bit. Now the air is 300 degrees Celsius, but it's just moving through twice as fast or something like that. All right. So you're not getting more convection because you're getting cooler air just going through faster. Okay. But what happens is you're pulling heat out of the system so fast that you have to replace it by using a little bigger flame. That flame is in contact with the drum. That flame is making the drum surface hotter. So when you use very high airflow, if you said, Scott, I'm going to roast in 12 minutes and I'm going to hit color 95 on my system. If you use higher airflow, you end up using a higher flame to still hit that 12 minutes color 95. And that bigger flame is making the drum hotter. So paradoxically, when you use too much airflow in a drum roaster, you're actually getting more conduction, not more convection. All right. So short story. My business partner used to have this 500 gram drum roaster that I was never crazy about the coffee coming out of it. And one day I was like, let me just play with this machine for a bit. And I started roasting it. I was like, oh, airflow is really high. So I cranked down the airflow a lot, did the cigarette lighter test where you can see the flame get pulled into the dryer hole, adjusted the airflow down, down, down. Eventually got to the point where I was where I thought it should be. And without making the outside of the beans darker, I ended up getting more than 1% increased weight loss on my roasts. So what that means is I was cooking the inside of the bean a lot more because I decreased conduction. Conduction isn't great at penetrating the beans. It's not as good at it as convection is. So long story short, if you use the lowest amount of airflow that doesn't give you smoky coffee, you're going to end up using a little bit less flame and you're going to get a little less conduction, and that's going to be good for development and flavor.
Okay, this is really interesting. And it kind of, your explanation of like how the newer roasters is designed is really interesting because it seems like it's quite practical to make modifications to an older roaster and get excellent results out of it. Like they have quite a long shelf life. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, they'll outlive us for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because you've got old roasters that you still use, right?
Not anymore, but I mean, I've owned machines that were built in the 50s and such. Yeah.
And you can still get very effective So how does one go about, like, say for example, it's built to the specs that it was in the 50s, but you want to roast in 2026. How do you modify it?
So it depends on the machine. The things that used to be missing back then, adjustable airflow wasn't really a thing. Adjustable drum speed, sometimes a thing. Usually the gas was very adjustable, but maybe you just didn't have any feedback to tell you precisely how much gas you're using, right? So ProBot used to have those levers on the side of the machine. Well, you can get a good roast, but you can't replicate it with a lever. So you end up putting a digital manometer on it, and that manometer says, oh, your pressure between the valve and the burner is whatever, 2 millibar, whatever. Now you have precise readings that you can replicate, right? So usually just making the fan speed, if the drum RPM is good, leave it alone, fine. If you need it, you add a adjustable fan, and then you just get a more precise reading on your gas, and then you're pretty good to go.
And you can put thermocouples or probes within to measure data quite accurately as well.
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing what you can do. Like, I love all this about coffee roasting, because it's like, as someone that doesn't really do it, like, I'm not a roaster, like I can't call myself a roaster, but it seems more daunting than it really is. And probably the most important thing is to get started and make a few mistakes and learn from them. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I would say that the two things to consider. One is that machine design is often the hindrance that's making you work harder. Like, a perfectly designed machine is so easy to use that anybody could roast good coffee today. You have an old drum roaster, you actually have to kind of hack the system to get great, good coffee, And the other thing is that in machines like that, you need a good, what's called between batch protocol. So what you do between batches matters a lot. You can't just drop a batch, wait till the temperature rises to 200 on a bean probe and charge. You can, but that's not going to give you perfectly consistent roasts. So you need a system to kind of hack it so that you reset the metal of the drum. It's not hard to do. Once you've done that, everything gets 10 times easier. If you haven't done that, you'll never be consistent. You'll never have predictable roasts.
What is the optimal between batch protocol?
So it does depend on the machine, but basically it's going to be a system that's going to reset the drum temperature. It's going to both cool the drum and also bring it back to the same exact thermal energy level before every charge. So in most drum roasters, that means something like this. You turn off the gas at some point before you drop a batch. You drop the batch, you close the door, you see what temperature you reach at about 4 minutes with the gas off. And you do this 10 times, let's say. And let's say you say, oh, okay, I'm averaging about 160 after 4 minutes. And then you say 160 is what I'm going to call my bottoming temperature. Every time I reach 160, I'm going to turn the gas on, maybe to 10%, maybe to 20%. And then I'm going to rise in about 1 minute to a charge of, let's just say 190, right? So you create the system, and since we can't directly measure the surface temperature of the drum, right, we're using the bean probe reading as a hack. It's a guide. It is not the drum temperature. It's also not the goal. It's just the guide that we're using to hack the system. And in almost every drum roaster, no matter how big, you can reset the metal in about 4 to 5 minutes, except like extremely large machines like that, they become a bit of a problem. But basically you can do it by this same, like 4 minutes down, 1 minute up, but using certain temperature guidelines in almost any machine. In air roasters, usually it's a lot simpler. It does, again, depend on the design, but usually you can just charge as soon as you get back to a certain bean temperature reading, assuming that bean probe is in certain locations. But the bottom line is that in air roasting, you still need the chamber walls to be reset, but it's much easier to do than with a big, massive drum.
So much, I'm learning so much. You remember Alan from The Hangover when he's counting cards and there's the numbers going? I'm like, this is a lot. I interviewed you, it was probably, I can't remember what it was. Last year at some time. And we were a lot more biographical in that one. So this is a good dichotomy. What percentage of like roasters out there do you think, in specialty coffee, so in our little niche, what percentage of roasters out there do you think are like truly elite? Because, and I'll start with my own kind of anecdote here, and that is that like I've come to realize that there's very few. And that roast, like, just lip smackingly send me to purgatory, in a trance. I've got a third eye on my forehead. Good, Yeah. They're very few. I
have no idea.
Okay.
That's hard to know. And And let's face it, there's many roasting companies that their job is to make money. Maybe they're roasting kind of dark. Maybe they're using relatively cheap coffee, and there's nothing bad about that, right? It's like there's got to be coffee at all different price points. There's going to be all different roast levels. There's all different tastes out there, right? You're probably not going to convince your grandfather to get into uber light third wave coffee, right? There's probably, maybe 100 something roasters I've come across where not every time, but at some point they have that that amazing experience. But let's face it, I say this as someone who I feel I'm a competent, careful roaster, but like it's the green, it's not us. And we're just getting out of the way of the green, right? Like if you brew an amazing V60, you don't think like, wow, I just took a mediocre coffee and turned it into a 10 out of 10. It's like, you were working with great beans and you got out of the way and just didn't screw them up, right? And that's roasting really, is don't get in the way of the great coffee, right? Whatever that means to you, it means low conduction, it means roasting light or whatever, but it's 70 something percent the coffee itself, the green.
What, while we're on this sort of line of thinking, I've got this, this concept I call the importance pie, right?
Yes.
So, let's just say I've got like a really amazing wash geisha that I'm drinking, right? What percentage of it is attributable to good growing / sourcing? What percentage is attributed to roasting, and what percentage for brewing? What's Scott Rao's opinion on that?
Off the top of my head, I would say 70, 20, 10. But I wanted
70 for 70 going to sourcing?
For growing, processing,
Yeah, okay.
the green, 20 for the roasting, maybe 10 for the brewing.
Okay.
Now, but I want to put a little asterisk here and say any one of those things could destroy a coffee, right? So if you decide you're going to roast it to charcoal, well, the roasting sure is 20% of a great cup, but it just became 100% of what matters in this particular case, right? So in the bounds of what you and I would think of as reasonable attempt at, something skillful, I would say 70, 20, 10. But any one of those three things, if you decide you're going to then brew that Esmeralda with brackish water, that 70 and 20 don't matter anymore, but you just turned it into nothing, So yeah, but under normal circumstances, 70, 20, 10.
Coffee brewing and in having good coffee is kind of like a 30-year mortgage that heavily favors the lender, just like they can pull out at any time, up the interest rate. If you miss one payment, you're out in the street. Oh man. It really be like that. And that's, that comparison of wine we were talking about earlier heavily favors the roaster. All right.
But it is getting easier.
I want to know a Scott Rao roasting horror story. Have you got one for me? Just like, what's a horror story?
Which kind of horror story?
Just like, what's the most bizarre thing you've witnessed for a client or just in your life?
Okay, I'll tell you two simple stories. One was that it was 1990s. I had my first cafe. I had one other person who roasted for me at this particular time. And he calls me, he's like, we had a fire. I was like, oh no. And by the way, the roaster was in the cafe, right? So he had a huge fire and he knew there was a fire. And for some reason he lost his mind and he opened the door. The beans inside the drum don't open the door, because when you open it, you give them oxygen and the fire gets much larger, right? So the beans spill out into the cooling tray. He said the flames were like 3 meters high, right? And the entire cooling tray got warped. Here's this like 3/4 centimeter thick steel that got completely warped, right? So I go there, I'm like, oh shit, right? And I stayed overnight, literally hammering the cooling tray smooth so that it was useful again, because it looked like this. It looked like waves because of the fire, and scraping all the soot and creosote off of all the inside parts of the roaster, putting everything back together, and then finishing the roast the next day. So that was awful.
You must have been kind of like hitting like a blacksmith, Game of Thrones
absolutely,
style.
Absolutely.
Forging Excalibur.
That's exactly what it felt like. And I was like, oh man, that was awful.
Yeah.
One funny thing, no names will be named, was I was doing a job. I was working with someone who he had okay coffee, but needed work. but I couldn't convince him it needed work. It was a little bit weird. Every once in a while, someone hires me who doesn't actually want to get better. They just want me to tell them their coffee's great. It's like a weird, like you're paying for validation, which I find very odd, but it is a thing. It does exist. And it was very frustrating because I felt like there were some easy ways to make the coffee better, but didn't really want to hear it because he was pretty happy with the coffee. So day 2, I walk into the cafe, walked into the back. I'm terrible. I'm a terrible person. I took one of his cups and I had gone to Dunkin' Donuts and I'd gone to get a cup of coffee and I poured the coffee into one of his cups and I handed it to him. And I was like, here, taste this. And he tasted it. He's like, oh, that's good. He's like, is that the Colombian we roasted yesterday? And I was like, no. He's like, wow, what is it? It's awesome. And I'm like, that's Dunkin'. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I bought it at Dunkin'. I put it in one of your cups because I wanted to convince him that there was work to be done. And he was dumbfounded for like 5 minutes. And then 5 minutes later, he was like telling me again how he had the best coffee in town. And I was like, I lost that one. I couldn't win now.
There was just no, the immovable wall.
Totally. I was, yeah.
I mean, if they got the money and, and just to pay you and, you don't mind.
There was no point, but it was, anyway, it was kind of funny.
It's interesting.
I mean, I really thought I didn't do it to be mean. I did it hoping that would actually get through because my words weren't getting through. And I was like, oh, maybe blindly tasting something from somewhere else that he knows he should be better than would get through, but it didn't get through.
Your story about the roaster catching fire inside the cafe reminded me. I worked at a place here in Melbourne and the chef left, the blow torches that they use to make like creme brulee or whatever. Yeah. This is the stupidest thing ever. He put it inside one of those like industrial toasters.
Yeah.
And so
why?
Well, great question. Because
okay.
About 10 minutes later, it exploded and it fired think of Drogon breathing fire. It fired like a beam of fire at a customer who had to duck to avoid getting burnt. And it was like this continuous flame for like 5 seconds. The chefs all ran. This is in the middle of busy service. And everyone was just like, what the hell just happened? And this guy the chef was so incompetent. And we're all like, it almost like defaced someone.
Yeah.
Just in the middle of the service. And everyone was just carried on. I think they sorted that table out. Their bill was like, yeah, you don't have to pay today because we almost killed you. But that was interesting.
I'll stop sitting next to the open kitchen from now on.
I'll tell you the restaurant after this. Maybe don't go there.
Okay. Little public service announcement. Almost so every roaster should have water tapped into the roasting machine. Okay. And almost no roaster does. Very large machines, that's just automatic. All the large machines, they're manufactured with water, basically a suppression system. Tap it in. Only costs a couple $100. Tap the drum and tap the chaff cyclone and put a little valve on the outside and with a spray head on the inside. And before every roasting session, just open the valve for a second just to purge any chaff or crap that got stuck in there and have it there. Because if you ever have a fire in the roasting drum, you just go for 2 or 3 seconds and that'll put out the fire and you won't ruin the drum or anything like that. It's much better than trying to stick water through the dryer or whatever, some awkward thing. Like just tap it. And it's one of those, that has saved me in the past so many thousands of dollars and so much headache. And especially, if you have a lot of different people doing the roasting, if you're using a drum roaster, it's going to happen. You're going to have a fire one day.
Yeah, listeners to this podcast, will never be never imagine being encouraged to tap that. You need to tap that, tap that all the way. Tap that.
Tap that. Yeah.
Don't clap.
Yeah.
Just
only
tap.
live once,
Yeah. You got to tap that. Insert a tap into your roaster is the message here. I've had a few problems with some suppliers lately of green where they've done a pretty bad job of sample roasting.
Okay.
How should sample roasting be done? Because if I get the green and re-roast it myself, I'm like, yeah, this is great. I want to buy that coffee. But I've had a few issues with sample roasting lately.
Yeah. I've had this conversation with some importers, some producers, where I basically said, it behooves you to sample roast really well because it's going to help you sell coffee. And it's just not really done. Like there's a lot of variability, and usually, I mean, I'll exaggerate and I'll just say, the low man on the totem pole is the one who's stuck on the sample roaster at the importer's office. The young kid who just started working there. Oh, go roast these, and most of them have old style drum roasters with no technology whatsoever, so they're kind of doing everything by eye, right? It's fine. It's not that you can't get good coffee that way. It's just harder, right? But sample roasting, like we measure color and weight loss religiously in our sample roasts. At the very least, you should measure the green moisture and the weight loss, because the relationship between the green moisture and the weight loss is a pretty good proxy for color. Now, I think you should measure the color, but let's say somebody only gives you 50 grams of sample. Well, you may not want to waste 10 grams of that coffee taking a color reading because you need to cup it all, right? Fine. But if you can, take a color reading. If you can't, at least measure the weight loss. Always measure the green moisture. Now, there are exceptions, but if your green moisture is, say, 10%. Now, for us, if our green moisture is 10, our weight loss is usually about 10.5 to 11. We're usually about a half point to a full point weight loss above moisture. And that is about our color 99. That doesn't mean anybody else's 99, just ours because of our grind setting, right? That's a pretty good proxy. Now we had like some Ecuadors recently that were processed in a funny way and the weight loss was below the moisture. That almost never happens. But the point is measure stuff. Make sure you're in a certain range. Now, when you're on the link, this is what I would tell you to do. As soon as you hear first crack, start your development time timer, right? Cropster and Artisan do this automatically. You can do it with a handheld timer if you want. And if you are doing, I know you like light roasts, right? So if you're doing a washed coffee, let's try 40 seconds development time for your washed and maybe 30 for your naturals on your first try with a coffee. And then you've already measured the green moisture, you've measured the weight loss, maybe you've measured the color, and you say, this was too light. Okay, then add a certain amount of development time. Now, effectively, on average, this is just on average, 2.5 seconds of development time is going to equal 0.1% weight loss. It's also going to equal 1 color point. So if you say, I'm 4 color points too light, okay, go 10 seconds more development time next time, because that's going to get you 4 color points darker. So it can become very formulaic. Most people don't know this, but that's all you need for sample roasting, really.
Yeah, and this is the difference between me buying, lots of coffee from them and not. And it's like I've had one kind of roaster importer that I've been buying from lately. It's like the sample roasting has just been really
always better to do your own sample roast when you can.
Yeah.
And if you're going to get sample roasts from a supplier, I would have that conversation. Like, how do you measure your roasts? How do you do it? And if you have the knowledge, maybe you can say to them, can you roast, I like it when my weight loss is about 1 point above the moisture. Can you do that for me? And put the onus on them to kind of hit your targets. That conversation can go somewhere.
Yeah, like they're really good to deal with, but had a few last 5 or whatever, which has been below average. How valuable is having fresh coffee to roast? Like, I think I noticed you air freight a lot of your coffee so that it can be as fresh as it can be. And so what's the value in that?
So I would say it's going to vary by coffee, and of course it's going to vary by storage conditions. But let's say under normal storage conditions, the first 6 months after processing, coffee tastes pretty good. Some point between 6 and 9 months, I can usually taste a bit of age. Some point between 9 and 12 months, it's like definitely aged, like it's a little baggy. So fresher is much safer in terms of flavor quality. Like if we get a nice geisha, we're probably going to air freight the geisha again because you insure your expensive stuff. You don't insure your cheap stuff, right? That geisha, if it goes on a boat, if it sits at a hot port for a month and then it goes on a boat, which may or may not be hot, and then it sits at another hot port for a few weeks and then it clears customs and it gets on a truck and it gets to you, almost always has lost a half point in quality just due to temperature, sometimes even more, right? If it gets air freighted efficiently, usually there's no loss of quality whatsoever. So it's a cost benefit calculation, especially useful for very expensive coffees. Obviously in Australia, it's very challenging to have fresh green because other than Indonesia, you're not very close geographically to many producing countries and it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time to get coffee here.
But I feel like in almost all cases, right, the customer, like the end customer being like the retail buyer, would almost always prefer paying a little bit more or more and getting, much better quality products.
So
like if they're in the market for a geisha or a product of coffee.
So if you look at, call it like the customer pyramid, right? Like our customers are people who are generally pretty nerdy, pretty serious about coffee, right? The average latte drinker, maybe not. Maybe they're just like pretty happy with anything that tastes pleasant, right? So I think you have to know your customer. You have to know what your customer values. Like I had about 20 coffees in the last 3 days. I didn't drink them all. I just drank like half because I was touring around cafes, And I would say 10 of them showed age in the green. Now, I'm not sure that anyone working in the cafes or anyone else at the cafes notice that, right? It's something that you may not notice. It's sort of like Quakers. Like I'm very tuned into Quakers because we remove them. Once you get used to doing that, like then you get more sensitive to tasting it. But if you've always tasted it in every cup of coffee you've ever had in your life, it's just always there. You don't really notice it, right? So I always think of this as if you have your very first cup of coffee in your entire life, and I say, what do you taste? You'll probably say it's bitter, right? No matter what it is, even if it's like a light roast, beautiful coffee. But how often do you write bitter in your cupping notes when you cup coffee? Like almost never, right? Because it's always there. So it's in the background. So you stop noticing it, right? Your brain is trained to not notice something that's always there because there's no value in noticing something that's always there. There's a lot more survival value in noticing something new or something moving, right? And so I think that the aged stuff is hard for most people to detect because it's usually there.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. And I think like it makes me wonder, like, is America kind of in a much better position to get like fresh coffee far more regularly because you have proximity to Central and South America?
Yep, Central and South Americans get to America pretty quick. Africans obviously take a long time, and especially, no matter where you are, things like Burundi, Rwanda, very difficult to move coffee out of those countries anywhere to anywhere else. Like it's just challenging.
Yeah.
But yeah, Colombia, especially to the US, is just lightning fast.
Yeah. Man,
it's great.
I got to be in that situation.
Yeah. I've often thought about living in Australia, and one of the things that gives me pause, I'm like, if I were to roast in Australia, like it's just going to be that much more challenging to get the kind of grip. I'm spoiled by fresh, very quick transport.
Oh
green,
man, I love it too.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. Get me kind of hot talking about this, Scott. But anyway, we last time I spoke to you, you said that you feel like it's going to be quite quick for roasting to be automated, and a lot of kind of jobs made obsolete in coffee roasting. That was probably a year ago. Have we had much progress on that, or like?
I don't necessarily know that jobs are going to be obsolete in the sense that roasting's already pretty automated. There's already a lot of opportunities to automate it. You still need humans for parts of the process, right? Now, if you're in a small roastery, you're always going to need a human to lift the beans and scoop the beans and all that. In a bigger roastery, usually one human can manage a lot of machines that are moving a lot of kilos of coffee, right? But something like the IMF, the Roost, like Loring has its own form of automation. Like you can pretty much just push a button, walk away, and the machine can do everything else, and you can get a very good result consistently. At the extreme, Roost with their P3000 machine is coming out with a loader where you can put 100 kilos of green into the loader and tell it, roast this coffee 33 times, 3 kilos per batch. And the machine is going to weigh that out to the gram. It's going to drop it in the machine. It's going to run a between batch protocol first. It's going to roast the coffee on your profile. It's going to drop it out based on time or temperature, development time, or whatever you tell it. And then it's going to run the BBP, and then it's going to load and weigh, and it's just going to do that endlessly until you stop it. So you could literally press start, walk away for 5 hours, and come back and have 100 kilos.
It's interesting you say this because I've been to like a few specialty coffee roasteries that might roast like 10 tons a week, right? And they've got 10 staff in that roastery. Yeah. And then last year I got to tour a coffee roastery that's roasting 100 tons a week for a lot of commercial clients here. It's got 3 staff. Like 100 tons a week, and it's got 3 staff.
The first time you see it, it's almost creepy.
Yeah.
Because I was in one once where there were 2 people working. There was thousands of kilos a day happening, and you actually couldn't see the coffee.
Yeah, no.
You never saw
100%.
the green. The coffee was in tubes. It was in roasters. It was in machines, and then it got packed. But you never actually saw the the roasted or green coffee.
And this is what I found so fascinating, because they literally do, like, when it's in the silos, it gets transported through the augers into the roaster, and then you don't even see it again. It does until it comes out as packaged coffee.
Yes.
This is like, it's amazing how much they can scale these things now, and the mathematics behind that as well. So it's very, very impressive. I can't actually talk about it too much more because I'm under an NDA. So
okay.
But like it's very impressive, and the scalability of it, in a way, it kind of makes, sometimes I think of the coffee business and cafe business as unfair, right? Because, there's a smaller business that's started by someone that's really, got a lot of respect in the industry. They've worked at it a long time. They may not be resourced, so eventually they open their cafe. But they're coming up against a group that has 20 cafes who can get their milk cheaper. They can get all their supplies cheaper. They can, get access to staff and all that sort of stuff. So, it makes sense because, as businesses grow, they buy larger amounts, get a bigger volume discount, yada, yada, yada. But it's also kind of like this weird thing.
That's all business. I mean, but you and I have one advantage, right? Like the human connection, right? You're at your cafe, you're meeting people. People get personally connected to what you're doing, and maybe they feel some personal connection to Starbucks or Dunkin' or one of these companies, but it's not the same. And you've got that, and you also can do things with some finesse that are it's very difficult, not impossible, but difficult to do those things at scale. And you and I are not spending all our time going to the chains because they happen to figure out how to get their costs 15% lower. Right. We're going to the individual shops where there's somebody who's tweaking the quality, a little more carefully than the chains ever could. So, yeah.
And what about AI as it relates to coffee roasting? Do you see any, because it kind of doesn't seem worth the investment right now, because all the AI people are going and making gazillions of dollars, in Silicon Valley.
Right. So I'm not a Luddite, I'm not anti-AI, or I don't, but I also think predicting the future is the easiest way to look foolish, right?
Yeah.
I don't see yet a lot of use for AI in roasting, in the sense that my IMF, I can create a profile. I can put virtually any coffee in that profile. I can push a button. I can predict to the second when that roast is going to end. I can tell you ahead of time, before I even roast the first time in my IMF. Based on my sample roast, I can tell you this coffee is going to take 7 minutes and 37 seconds in my IMF to get to color 99. And I can press go and the machine can do it. I don't know how AI is going to make that better. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying I don't see it yet. So there's a lot of effort being put into AI. Everyone I've ever talked to who's trying to do that has been very dismissive of roasting knowledge. I've been like, hey, do you want to talk about that? They're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, but the data you're working with is garbage data, like garbage in, garbage out. It may not be good to be using it. They're like, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm a software engineer or whatever. And I'm like, okay, and we talked about this a little bit with the Bogan tech guy, earlier. It's like, there's a little bit of arrogance. I've heard the whole, I'm an engineer a million times, that as if that's a substitute for coffee knowledge, rather than embracing both, right? I'm an engineer. And now if when I signed up with Decent Espresso, John is a literal genius. John is incredibly smart. He had an incredible idea. And he said, yeah, but I don't know that much about coffee. I need your help so that I understand what the coffee needs so that we make this machine as good as possible. And very few people who are that smart have the humility to say, I see my weakness. Now I want to go get help to shore up that weakness. So that's, yeah.
And just to add a bit of context with the tech reference you made there that I had. So I was looking at buying a $60,000 piece of equipment, and I traveled interstate to go test it. And the I guess tech or assistant engineer, whatever, that was kind of assisting me there, just got in my way the whole time. I need to go somewhere else to now test that same machine just so I don't have to deal with them. Yeah. And it's like, this guy's just,
He didn't want to give you the freedom to experiment because he knew better. And it's like, well, but I'm the customer and this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Just sometimes when you're testing those things, who you've got assisting you and showing you is big difference. So, and this guy just, very frustrating, very annoying. And anyway, I won't go too much further into that. We've just about reached the end, Scott. I mean, we've been, what a podcast if you wanted to learn about coffee roasting. My brain's just full of information. This is like neuroplasticity on steroids, So is there anything else for coffee roasting before we wrap up that you want to sort of let everyone know about? Or do you reckon we've covered it off pretty well?
I think we did pretty well with it.
I think we did as well. The had so much fun and learned so much here and there. So I guess the final question is, what would you like to ask me?
Well, Kirk. So at Project Zero, you serve a lot of co-ferments. Where do you see that going in the future? Because I have some thoughts about that, but as someone who uses it every day, I want to hear like, where's this going? Is it gonna take over? Is it gonna fade? Is it gonna morph into something more subtle? Like what's gonna happen with co-ferments?
I think it's only going to increase in prevalence because there's kind of like for a number of reasons. Like, and let me talk about the customer side first, and that is kind of like I explained before. The language of it is just so much easier. Like they walk up, they see strawberry cheesecake on a box. No more questions need to be asked. Here's your money. And
probably no one's ever asked, what does it taste like?
Yeah. And someone actually came in this morning and said, look, I could get, similar flavor from an El Diviso Ombligon that would cost me $20, but I can pay $7 for this. And it's, it's very, very much the same level of quality to most people, not to everyone, but to most.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like having this 90-point experience without the 90-point price tag. It's scalable. The language is easily understood by customers, and the taste is like, something's wrong if it doesn't taste like strawberries. You've done something really bad. So I actually think it's kind of, and mind you, that's not all of what we do. We serve a wider range of coffees, and I wanted to grow the spectrum further, but like, it's never been easier for me as someone that's, had the Sub-Zero coffees previously and done the competitions and served geishas. It's never been easier to connect with the common man over coffee than it is right now. And co-ferments has been probably the biggest lever for that.
So I'll say a couple of things about it. One is that not saying it can happen at all, but I don't think co-ferments really would qualify ever as like 90 in the sense that I find almost all co-ferments, the acidity is not that prevalent. It's almost like it's being outcompeted by the new flavor that's added. And balance is usually a little out of whack. You might get hit in the face with strawberry cheesecake, but it's not like balance or nuance,
Yeah.
Not to say it's not delicious. It's just, So I had an experience once where this is about a year ago. I had this geisha from Colombia. Of course, it's always Colombia, right? And it was amazing. I mean, I think it was 89 points. And if you know anything about me, I don't score 89 more than like 2 or 3 times a year, including Panamas and all that stuff, right? And I called the guy who sold it to us. I was like, is this co-ferment? What's going on here? He's like, no. And I called him a week later. And I'm like, are you sure? He says, no. Called him a week later. I'm like, because we know each other really well. We'll just mess with each other. But I'm like, are you sure? He's like, well, I talked to the producer. I was like, yeah. And he said, well, turns out that the barrels it was fermented in had been used for a co-ferment, and there might have been residue in that barrel from the co-ferment. And I was like, this is fascinating because this coffee was, to me, 89 points. It was delicious with just this tiny hint of pineapple that was detectable but not strong, but just enough to get you a little excited, like, where'd that come from, right? And I realized, maybe this co-ferment thing, I mean, I get it. If you're a farmer and you have a Castillo that tends to be quite vegetal or bitter, and you can get a lot more money by processing it as a co-ferment, go for it, right? But in this case, here was a geisha that usually without any residue is like 87 to 88 points. And this tiny hint of pineapple took it over to this other place. And I thought, this is interesting because maybe this infused and co-ferment thing could be used at a very subtle level to enhance coffee. Let's say we have an off year, there's not enough rainfall, you got a lot of Quakers, whatever. You might be able to tweak flavor like this in a way that almost anybody would enjoy more and wouldn't find overwhelming, right? And so I'm optimistic that it has a place in the future, especially if climate change makes the flavors we're used to like much less, frequent or much more difficult to achieve.
And I suspect it's probably done a lot more than we realize. And you're Scott Rao, and if you can say that you enjoyed a coffee that had just a tint, a tinge, then I think it's not declared as much as we probably would like it to be.
Yeah.
And if I go back to the Panama scandal where a coffee was disqualified for having foreign additives or whatever the term was. And I spoke to a lot of the producers there, and they're like, look, we're not against this conceptually, people doing it. We just don't want it up against our geisha. We want to preserve, they're really I guess, protective over their brand as Panama, and that's as a collective. Like they all fight amongst each other, and they'll even tell you that. But they united in wanting to protect the quality of their product, and so I think even where I'm going with this is even producers like that. It's like we're encouraging of producers in other countries to do this. Yeah, sure, but just don't put it up in a wash competition or a natural competition, which is totally fair. And I like the rule change now at the World Barista Championship and the World Brewers Cup where they allow for the use of it now because particularly in Australia, there's a quite ugly trend of, if someone loses, everyone else who didn't win accuse the winner of using a doctored coffee. So it's like, I kind of like that now because you've taken away the controversy. It's like, all right, just go. And if you need to declare it, do it.
It would sort of be like, okay, allow steroids in sports. And now it's like, now it's just like, free fall, but level playing field for better, for worse. Interestingly, though, that you touched upon something, there are a lot of producers who do co-ferment and infuse and don't say it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I actually had some today where it wasn't claimed, but I told my friend, I was like, this is going to be a co-ferment and you could smell it before you drink it. And that's a little bit of a problem. Like, I don't really know why people are doing that. Like there was one case I heard of where someone who was allergic to coconut had a co-ferment that wasn't declared a co-ferment and they had a reaction to it and they survived. But so there is this small percentage chance that somebody's health could be harmed by, having whatever pineapple or coconut or something in their coffee and they, weren't told it was there.
And look, don't be afraid to enjoy it either. Like if you just gave that anecdote and it's like, we don't need to just be like conceptually, no, I don't drink coconut,
there's this funny old saying, and I apologize if it's offensive because it's not meant to be. It's just more like a joke of sorts, but like someone once said, like the difference between a religion and a cult is that the religion's been around longer, right? But that's not the point. It's not that religions are good or bad. It's just more like new ideas often seem like cultish or bad. And then if they're around long enough, people are like, it's cool, right? So maybe this co-ferment thing, it's too new. A lot of people are hating on it because it's unnatural and this and that. And then maybe once it's around long enough, people are like, it's cool. Right? Because there's so many things that have been like that in life where we're just a little biased against new stuff. We're a little scared of it or we see the dangers in it. But then once you get used to it, it doesn't seem so dangerous anymore because no one died and, everything, life just went on and you just get used to it.
And look, some people roast me and don't come to my cafe that are in the industry because I use co-ferments. And it's like, I couldn't give a shit because it serves me well if you don't get into it because I'll just sell more. And because the customers love it. And I think that's part of like another thing I think we're getting better at ironing out in coffee is it kind of like, arrogance and, snobbery, people that drink their espresso like this. But I think, it's overwhelmingly good in my opinion. It's overwhelmingly been good. And, but that's not to say like, it should be transparent. But buyers of coffee deserve to know what they're buying. And, even for the safety reasons that you outlined. So as long as those conditions are met, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But I've got to let the world know about some sponsors. They're my sponsors. So, okay. Timor, big time supporter of this podcast. And they've got some of the most affordable and effective brew gear around. So
great grinders, really good.
Great grinders, great scales. It's they've really democratized brewing, so you can do it cheaply. I'd recommend you hit up timor.com right now or go to a distributor near you. You would have heard a few Oatly ads by now. And Scott, you'll be able to check out my new cafe that's opening
when I'm back in February. I will
so you'll be back.
Come back.
So it's going to be a lightning quick espresso bar. Okay. And I'm partnering with Barista Group who use Makiba Izaga Grumbo 8 grinders. And they're going to be supplying the Uber Milk Plus as well. Have you seen the Uber Milk Plus?
I don't know. I mean, I saw an Uber Milk at Beta in Sydney. I don't know if it's the Plus or not.
The three-headed iPad monster. Yeah. So
it was very cool.
Very, very cool. So he's got one of the first ones in Australia. So the importer actually is based in Sydney, which is why I can't get one. So we're going to be the first in Melbourne that are using it. And so Barista Group are helping me out with that. So they've been supporting the show. So if you want to modernize your coffee bar, which I heartily suggest you do, hit up Joe from Barista Group. Just don't waste your time. Just go talk to Joe. He'll save you a boatload of cash, make your bar more efficient. And I'm so excited for this new concept as well, because what we're going to be doing, and I posted some reels about this, and I did a podcast with Matt and Jeremy from Barista Hustle about pre-making espresso. So all the espresso for milk coffee, so your flat whites, lattes, cappuccinos, whatever you want to call it, we're going to be making at our current store and shipping to our new store and dispensing from taps. So instead of, if hypothetically speaking, if a customer wants to come in and have a flat white, usually I would have to brew an espresso. And that would take 30 seconds. So from start to finish, it's about a minute to make a latte, right?
Yep.
Now it's going to be like less than 10 seconds because I put the cup under a tap and it's actually much more precisely made espresso. And I'll have the Uber milk plus making my milk. And then I pour it in a cup and it's ready. So like it's going to be, my hypothesis is it's going to be lightning quick. So I'm really excited and I really hope that you come. In fact, you have to come.
I will come.
If you don't come, I'm going to put a hex on you.
You know that Beta in Sydney's doing something similar.
They are.
And I tasted it and it was very good.
Yeah.
You know what? This Uber Milk espresso thing solved one kind of small annoying problem as a cafe owner, which is that let's say you split shots. You've got a single shot, you've got a double shot, but maybe you have an 8-ounce cup and a 12-ounce cup, right? So maybe you put 2 shots in the 12, but then the latte is stronger than the 8-ounce latte with 1 shot. Or, there's no way to make them identical in strength. But he had the Uber Milk set so that he could push the button for effectively like 1 dose for like the 8-ounce and 1 dose for the 12-ounce. And so they were proportional. So both were exactly the same strength, which trivial thing, but I love that.
Well, this is the thing. We could have in the future, like if we really want to, we can have up to 7 or 8 different sizes for our customers.
Yeah.
Because you don't actually have to re-extract the coffee or extract it differently. You just fill up the volume. Yeah. So in so many ways, this could be like, I know people will think, oh, yeah, you're making money out of this if it goes well, Kirk, but it could be the savior for the coffee industry. Like it's produced more exactly, I guess you could say, and it can be done to a very high standard. And then the operating cost for a cafe, because it's so much quicker and lower, you're using less staff. And in Australia, there's more barista jobs than there are baristas to fill them. So it's a need. And then like the tailoring to your customer as well. Like you could have a piccolo and fill it to a certain volume up to like a venti and you'd be fine.
So I'm going to make a plug for innovation like this, right? Which is that everyone wants wages to be higher. Great. Everyone wants producers to get paid more. Great. No one really wants their latte to cost more, right? But in order for, wages to go up, in order to be able to pay more for coffee, and it's like something has to give, or we need some sort of innovation, right? And we can't, as much as you'd like to be like, I'm just going to pay all my baristas $50 an hour, like lovely, but maybe you can't make any money. Now the business fails, right? So I'm not saying that this is the solution, but like, innovation like this is needed to figure out what can work, because it's pretty hard as a small cafe owner in Australia to make money because there's too many damn cafes, quite honestly. Like you've got like 1 cafe per 1,000 people, something like this. Yeah. Some insane number that's inconceivable. Years ago, it used to be like 1 per 5,000 people.
Yeah, and on a per capita basis, it's just stupid.
Right. So now you've got intense competition. Prices have not risen anywhere near what inflation and costs have risen. You need an escape valve. You need something to make this equation make sense. And, anyway, I hope you succeed with it. Like I hope it works out,
people are so eager to throw rocks on the internet and stuff like that. And I don't really care. But like a lot of people are really interested in this, and people who are genuinely smart in the coffee industry are quite curious about it. Yeah. And I think, and the flavor, I should mention as well, the flavor is excellent. Yeah. I'm not degrading quality at all. Yeah. Like the flavor is fantastic.
All of our lives, we were told, whether it was roasted or whether it was brewed, we were told that fresher is better. Now, sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not. But when you break that, when the first time I said to people, please wait 1 or 2 months before you use our coffee, people were accusing me of trying to sell them old coffee. Oh, you've just got old coffee to sell. That's why you're saying that. I'm like, no, I want you to have the best experience possible. There's always the skepticism. There's always the hate. But at the end of the day, if you blindly taste it and you're like, you know what, that's damn good, then just go for it. And,
well, it was incredible what we did with the Barista Hustle guys, because, we did it blind. And, Jeremy, all of us, I believe, preferred on average the pre-batched espresso.
Yep, I believe it.
And because it's actually far more balanced, because without the crema, and it's far more consistent flavor experience wise for the customer. So There's myriad reasons why it's fantastic, and I'm going all in, baby. So, enjoy, guys. Enjoy. But thanks so much, Scott. This has been a fantastic podcast. If you've been listening to this, if you've listened all the way up till now, you've learned an absolute shitload of stuff. So awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. We're so lucky to have people like yourself in the industry, and taking the time to come and see me and give people the knowledge. I really appreciate that. And to that end, please tell 2 friends, like, subscribe, comment on all that stuff helps me. I want to keep doing this to help me grow it. Help me grow it, people. So like, subscribe, all that stuff. Scott, I'll let you go. It's Friday afternoon here in Australia. So have a cocktail or something tonight. Enjoy. Go down to the beautiful Yarra River. What have you got planned for tonight?
Just going to go to the gym.
Go to the gym? What are you training?
Just, a little cardio today.
Yeah, you're looking pretty fit.
Yeah, I'm trying to fight aging.
Yeah. How old are you now?
53.
You're looking good.
Thanks.
You're looking very good. I'm 31, but I look 40. I feel like.
You look 31.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there, folks. We're going to go enjoy. Thank you. Hooroo. See you next time. Bye-bye. You can either listen to the third Oatly ad of the day about how you can go to oatly.com and find recipes for the amazing drinks, or read the Future of Taste report. It's from the future. Or learn about the sustainability work. Or you can press the 15-sec forward button on your Podblank device. It's totally up to you.